Hello, welcome to the podcast, for Revenants' Hiatus. I'm Tim, I'm the writer and illustrator of the comic Revenants, and if you're watching this, it's because it is currently on hiatus, and I know that's a scary sentence for any webcomic, knowing a few of my favorites who went on hiatus and never came back, but I promise I'm a little bit more organized than I was 10 years ago when I first tried making a webcomic. And I've decided to take a short break from uploading pages while I continue illustration. And to make sure there's something for patrons and readers of the comic to still engage with, because #content, I am doing a call for Q&As around the comic. And thank you for all those that have submitted so far. I'm working on a lot of these kind of in advance of the hiatus, because this is why I needed the hiatus. But I am hoping to do some more as these are going live, so feel free to ask any questions in my Google form, which I will promise I will remember to link below in this video. And yeah, it would be cool to hear any questions you might have about the comic, assuming, of course, you know about the comic and you didn't just find this video on accident through some weird algorithmic thing, in which case, welcome. Revenants is my comic project. It's existed in various forms probably since I was in high school, and being who I am has had a couple stabs, none of which kind of came to anything, but Revenants is actually something I'm really proud of and excited with, and hoping to actually finish properly one day. Maybe one day in a big bound book, who knows? Indie publishing has come a long way, but for now it is in webcomic form. The place to be, the place to find more about it, is revenantscomic.com. Hoping one day that I can maybe start archiving the actual pages there. But for now, it links out to several webcomic hosts. Those webcomic hosts being the likes of Webtoon, Tapas, and Comic Fury, amongst a couple others. But also Patreon, where you can support the comic and get pages a week ahead of everyone else, including the full color versions. But you also get behind the scenes stuff like this a week earlier, but also the 3D models, the process videos out of Procreate, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I think I want to show to people who are supporting me. And at present, obviously everyone who supports me, that money's kind of going straight back into commissioning cover art, which is really exciting. It's been a great excuse to approach friends and some of my favorite artists and be like, hey, do you want to get involved with this project? I actually have a little budget for a change. As someone who never really commissions people, it's been quite an exciting process. So that's pretty much where your Patreon support goes to right now. And I appreciate all my patrons. Speaking of which, this first Q&A has been brought to you by one of my longtime patrons, Mountain Goat. And I say longtime patrons, Goat's been supporting the comic since before it was Revenants. So the first stab at this comic was actually The Conspiracy, and Goat's been around pretty much since then, so I'm glad you stuck around all this time. And his first question is definitely just Goat being horny on main, and I can appreciate that, both as a pun and as just a fun thing for me to do today. And I was planning to do actually quite a few different people's questions per video, but I got an absolute list of them from Goat, and I'm like, I think that's just episode 1 now. So the first question, horny on main, is what is Todd's mom doing right now? And Conspiracy had Todd's mom appear on page a couple of times. Revenants has had no such luck, unfortunately, for Goat. And I mean, back in the day, Todd's mom was just kind of like a generic mom, and even in character design was just Todd with long hair, because that was about where my art level was at the time. And yeah, apparently garnered a little bit of a following as a MILF, surprisingly, which is not something I anticipated when I was 20 years old drawing my first quote-unquote serious comic. And her lack of appearance in Revenants, unfortunately, has made Goat specifically sad. So right now, I think if Todd's mom were to appear, I think we just see her like living her life. Todd and the rest of the gang in my comic have ended up in like a varsity town. If you live in South Africa, it's like a Grahamstown or something, where it's just pretty small. Like the universities kind of dominate its existence, and people who are living there are kids and sort of young adults who have moved there to study. So Todd's mom's probably enjoying an empty house in a completely different city to her poor son going through it as part of the script. and probably just doing the things that moms do. I'm imagining it's brunch, it's hanging out with her friends, it's like, you know, mom shit, and doesn't even know what's going on because Todd is just, you know, off on a city by himself and just doesn't ever phone. So she probably sends the odd SMS going, "How you doing? I haven't heard from you for a while. How's Josie? How's Glitch? Are you guys well?" And then Todd sending it, "Yeah, no, it's all good." You know, because that's what we're all like when we're 20-something years old. So I imagine she's just living it up mom style in a completely different city to everyone else in the plot. But brings us to our second question with how did Todd and Josie meet? And I had an actual like sort of canon story that I always wanted to turn into a comic when I was still doing conspiracy and had boundless energy to just draw comics all day. And I suppose more than boundless energy, had lots of time, free time between classes and stuff like that. So it's still probably loosely canon in my mind, even though the characters have been aged up a bit, because Todd was more explicitly like a skateboarder in senior high, sort of junior varsity in the original comic before I aged him up, and as such kind of didn't go anywhere without a skateboard, which was me in high school. And I wasn't even a terribly good skateboarder. I just used it to get around, and like closest I got to being quote unquote, I guess, cool. So my characters were kind of a reflection of that Todd was more explicitly a skateboarder. So I always kind of pictured that like Todd and his best friend Glitch were at some skate park trying to impress girls and kind of pulled it off, but more because like Josie was there with the rest of the band trying to look at boys, and Todd just absolutely like ate shit off of a ramp in front of her, and she was like, "Are you okay? You look like you've just about killed yourself," and probably in borderline concussion, maybe asked her out. I don't know, something to that effect. I never really filled it out. So maybe I imagine there's probably still something there like that, even though Todd doesn't skate much more in the comic. Maybe it was the events before they all got to varsity together or something like that. So I'd say that's the canon this time around still. So our next question from Goat is, what does Lycan do in his free time? Like, what's he doing on his free time? So Lycan, aka Max, aka he's the company man through and through, right? Like, from the outside, everyone sees him working as the boss at this auto shop, right? And everyone's like, that's just his life, right? He works as a manager at the shop, like that business is his life. That's all he will do. And I don't think anyone aside from like the actual Revenant cell knows that his actual life is the terrorist work and subterfuge to try and bring down a government sort of psyop, sort of black op organization that no one knows about. So like your average dude who just can't turn it off after the job, I think if he's not like actively working at the shop or doing a mission, he's preparing for that mission, right? Like he's that guy who's always like hiking and running up and down streets with like weights on and stuff like that. He's hitting the gym, he's hitting the shooting range on the sly, and from the outside it just looks like he's always at the shop, but he's just pretty much always ready for the shit to hit the fan at all times, and it just manifests as like the guy who's always at work. But he's also definitely that guy that I think if he ever were to accomplish the goals set out by the Revenant cell, I don't think he would know what to do with himself anymore. Like, I don't think he would become like a mercenary for someone else because his mission's very localized to the country he lives in. So I think he just becomes like those characters in like the odd movie where it's like, now what? Like, it's done? I don't know what to do with myself anymore. So I don't think he has like hobbies that aren't in the actual like mission of making this happen, of overthrowing this black ops group, and just like, if it ever happened, I don't think he'd know what to do with himself. But up until that point, his entire life is thrown at that. So the next one from Goat's a bit of an odd one, but I can only think of like one answer for it. So the question is, how many times does Glitch get punched in the comic? And I mean, as far as I can remember, it's just the one. I mean, does he have more than the one coming? I'm not sure, because currently in chapter 1, when the two of them, Todd and Glitch, get confronted by Tyler at their flat, he gets a decent pistol whip, but I don't think he gets too many more than that. Like, do you think he needs more than that, Goat? I'm not so sure about that question. But I guess, yeah, just the one that he gets punched as far as I know. And then, yeah, the last one from Mountain Goat today is, does the band ever get a record contract? And I think, like much of the comic being based on sort of a loose version of Write What You Know, I live in Johannesburg, South Africa, therefore the setting is kind of a loose South Africa analog, where just things went way worse in 1994 than they did. And as such, I kind of feel like the band is going to be like a lot of local rock acts that I enjoyed when I was in high school and varsity, where there was like a bunch of bands that did really, really well in a very small local demographic, because locally rock doesn't kind of have the toehold it did overseas, I think. And so I think the comic kind of has a similar thing where it's like the band do really, really well on like the sort of bar circuit, the alternative club circuit, maybe the odd goth club, and they do really well there and like have a decent following there, but they're not like poppy enough to end up on like local radio with an actual like studio backing them. So I think it's going to be like our local acts where you get a record contract from like the one decent distributor that handles all the rock bands, and you'll do maybe a lot of local tours, maybe a couple into sort of like the odd country that for some reason realizes you exist, but they're never going to be the sort of pop act that makes it onto the radio, I think. So that's just kind of what our local scene is, and therefore I think that's kind of what the New Canada scene is, that the band won't quite get the breakout they're hoping for, but will have a good time performing for like drunk dudes at rock clubs, I think. Cool, so that I guess wraps up our first Q&A. Thanks a lot, Mountain Goat, for all those questions. I quite enjoyed answering those today. I have a couple more rounds of questions that are ready and waiting to go, so those will be up in the next couple of weeks. But if you have any questions about the comic, please feel free to submit through my form, which again I promise I will link in the description below. And in the meantime, yeah, I'd love to see you on the Patreon. I'd love to see you on the Discord. You can access both of those through revenantscomic.com. I don't know if I need to say the obligatory YouTube like and subscribe, because I almost never upload onto YouTube, so it's going to be the string of hiatus videos and then question mark. I don't know what the rest will be, but I thank you for spending time with me here today, and I hope you will come back for the next couple, and I hope I will see you either on the Discord or commenting on the comic pages. Cool, have a good one, everyone.